Hey, it's my thread to shine. Okay, so my real parents are my mom and her twin brother. No, I'm not Joffrey. I found out last summer when I was 15. It was nighttime and I came down a staircase to get a glass of water. My mom was laying on the sofa. She had been drinking earlier. She doesn't usually get drunk. She likes to drink wine, but never really enough to get drunk. But this time she was really drunk. I passed her on the way to the kitchen and she just spoke up and said that she was glad I wasn't her husband's child. I asked her WTF was she talking about when she told me that her brother was the father of me and my siblings. She stated it was the reason why we were so perfect. I haven't confronted my mom or her brother about it. My mom either pretends she never told me, or she was too drunk to remember. I'm 100% sure it was consensual incest, not rape. My mom talks to her brother a lot, and she always visits him. My dad is always away, so sometimes my mom will bring us to her brother's house and we'll sleep over. Me and my siblings even have our own rooms at his house. If anyone has any questions I'll answer them, but I'm going to shower first. Edit. Back. A few years ago I met a girl at a mutual friend's house who ended up telling me how her grandfather was also her father, so this girl's mother was raped by her own father. She told me this because I had given her a bracelet that I was wearing. I make jewelry and like to hand it out. I have very tiny wrists, and she was so excited that it fit her. She was excited about that because on one hand she was missing a thumb and her hand was just kinda strange looking and small, so most bracelets would slide off. We ended up taking some hits out of a gas mask bong, my first time ever doing so, and she told me about her grandfather as an explanation for her hand. She also told me about how her brother raped her, even on the day her mother died. I think it's safe to say incest was common in her family. You wouldn't have really noticed anything different about her unless you knew. But she was quite small and just a tad strange looking. Plus, deformed hand. Honestly, it was pretty surreal being so stoned and having this girl who was mostly a stranger tell me this so calmly. This was in the ghetto, and she was with her boyfriend and their baby. She was very sweet, a real spunky firecracker type girl. I've never seen her since, but I think of her often. I hope her life turned out alright. So yeah, not my story, but it's one that always stuck with me. Throwaway for the obvious reason. I am the product of abuse incest. My grandfather raped and impregnated my mom when she was 13. We came from an extremely religious family at the time, so abortion was never an option. From my understanding of things, this had been going on between him and my mother for a lot of years. He went to jail, where he still is. I have thought about going to see him a lot over the years, just out of morbid curiosity, but I have never done it. There was never really any secret about it. My mom and her mother raised me. They scaled the information about the situation to age appropriate levels, but they never hid anything. It was weird, and I got some counseling about it when I hit my teen years. But to be honest, I feel like it never really strongly affected me. Throwaway for obvious reasons. My dad basically raped my mom to have me. My mother never wanted a kid her entire life, and kind of hated children in general. My dad knew this when he married her, but I think secretly it was always his plan to somehow find a way to have a kid. He tried to get her drunk quite a few times so she would forget about a condom and whatnot, but it never worked. One day, he came home from a night of hard partying with his friends, and basically had his way with my mom. She resisted and tried to fight him off when she figured out what his intent was, but was overcome. My dad told me all of this when we went fishing last year. He thought I would be happy with the story and think of him as some sort of hero. I don't. My grandmother is a product of rape. The people she thought were her parents were actually her grandparents, and her sister Sophie was actually her mother. Her bio mother, Sophie, was raped by a male friend when she was 17 and fell pregnant. Since it was 1929, abortion was not an option, so they made the decision for her to be raised as a sister instead of granddaughter. She was not told until her bio mother died at 35 from cancer. She was extremely upset at being brought into the world the way she was, and that she was never allowed to know Sophie as her mother. My grandma never told anyone but her husband, and my mom and her sister did not find out until my mom was 25 when my grandfather accidentally told her. I'm technically not supposed to know, but my hearing is far more astute than my mom realized when she has phone conversations at full volume a room away. I'm late to the thread, but I am a product of rape. My mother met my father, who was a crack and heroin addict, and had my older sister with him. They got married and he started beating her and my sister regularly. The abuse went on for years until he was brazenly bringing women home to duck in front of her, and my mom had enough and left. She had nowhere to go and was sleeping couch to couch with my sister. He looked everywhere for her, found her somehow and raped her. I was conceived. When I was born he tried to say I was the neighbor's child and my mom was sleeping around, even though I am the spitting image of his mother. Anyway, he tried to choke me to death as an infant. My mom stabbed him with a hot dog poker. Not sure of the name, but it's the utensil you use to turn over hot dogs on a grill. He went to jail and got out a few years later, and my stepfather shot him when he resumed stalking my mother. I found out I was a product of abuse from my little sister, using it as a way to make fun of me in an argument. My mom confirmed it nonchalantly when I asked if it was true. My family is all types of ducked up. Funny story. He sent me a friend's request on Facebook a few days ago, trying to get in contact with me 28 years later. It's sad. I do not want a relationship with a guy who has raped and beat most of the women he has in his life. I'm a bit late into this, but duck it. My dad was born from a rape. He found out when I was 8 years old. The day he found out was when I lost my dad. It ducked him up so bad. He had picked up drinking and gambling. On average he would drink about a 12-pack a day. It was ducked up because he was such a good man before he found out. Up to this day we still don't know who would have told him this, but I feel like if I ever found out, I wouldn't be able to forgive that person. My father used up our savings and basically used all of our money on beer and horse racing. On day when my mother confronted him and told him to leave us alone forever, he replied to her, "I will leave you and I will never bother you again, and I swear I will pay you back all the money I've used stolen from you." 2 months later he passed. Shortly after, my mother received thousands of dollars in social security money. Still ducking, miss him. My grandfather was the product of rape. My family are from the Fujian province, and my grandfather was the result of the Japanese invasion into China. His mother died in childbirth and he was an orphan, worked as a farmer, an alcoholic, and died of lung cancer. My father doesn't talk much about his father, but I hear stories from the rest of the family. But my father got a scholarship to study in Canada and moved over there to get an education. Got his bachelor's in engineering and master's in economics from the University of Alberta. When I was about 14 or 15, I found out my birth mother had been raped repeatedly by her stepfather. One of those times had resulted in me. I have always known I was adopted, but I had been told that my birth father was my birth mother's boyfriend. It was when my anger issues towards him became too much that my mother told me the truth. I still have some anger issues about it, but they are directed at the correct person now. And the kicker was, she was the one that got kicked out of the house. Somehow she managed to travel nearly 100 miles to the nearest big city and was taken in by a home for unwed mothers. They helped her through her pregnancy and then helped her find people to adopt me. She was still a kid herself, celebrated her 16th birthday a month or two after I was born, and couldn't take care of me on her own. Her mother had told her that the only way she could come home was without me. Apparently, one of her aunts wanted to take me in and raise me as her own. But by the time they found out, the paperwork had already gone through and I was legally in a new family. It was a closed adoption, but my mom sent letters to my birth mother through the agency to let her know I was doing well. Eventually, they started corresponding on their own, and I got to talk to her and my half-siblings on the phone once in a while. That's how my mom found out about what had happened. My birth father either left my grandmother, or she kicked him out. But not until years later, and last I heard, he was living somewhere in southern Mexico. I've never had the opportunity to confront him, but I would imagine there would be violence involved. Some very therapeutic violence. My mom is a product of rape. My grandparents lived in Mexico at the time in a remote and rural village. My grandfather stole my grandmother while she was doing laundry when she was 16 or 17. She told me he took her to the mountains and raped her and beat her over several days. When she got back, her only option was to marry him because she was shamed. She never saw her family again. Every child my grandmother had was a product of rape. 16 children. He beat her mercilessly. Most all of her male children were also rapists and pedophiles. They tried to abuse their sisters while they were sleeping multiple times. My uncles raped and molested my sister and I for over a decade. My grandma got away when my grandfather escalated and tried to kill her with a machete. Her oldest son found out and whisked her away to the US. She never remarried and had a fear of men. He died a horrible death, alone and regretful, at the age of 73. I was the product of incest. My birth mother came from a very backwards community in Poland that was very messed up with drugs, military, and well, incest. My birth dad is my birth mother's uncle. My birth mom went to America with my birth dad and their family to see New York and left me there. They dropped me off at an orphanage and didn't fill out papers. They just left me there. I'm 19 now. 2 years ago, one of my relatives came from Poland to America and actively sought me out and found me through my current parents and the orphanage. Apparently when my mom left me in America, it was a big deal to the family. There are stories of me being a big American rich guy. They have stories about how I live in big land, own a washing machine, and they talk about straight teeth or something. My relative didn't speak perfect English and he was slightly skewed in the head. They had all these stories of me, and I was only 17. I was a foster kid for most of my life, didn't live on big land, and I don't own my own washing machine. My current parents do, but I don't. I did get lucky, and have fairly straight teeth. So at least I lived up to that hype. The only thing they gave the orphanage was my name, which was written on a piece of paper, and my weight in grams. They wanted to give me an American name, so they named me after a state in the United States. My name is Vermont. My grandfather was the product of rape. My great-grandfather was married to a woman who was put into a mental asylum. He had 3 little girls, so hired a nanny from the Cherokee reservation nearby. He raped the nanny. She gave birth to my grandfather. To my knowledge, my grandfather never confronted his father about it, but his mother, the nanny, made it clear. She died getting eye surgery so she could see my mother when she was born. I am not a product of rape, but one of my kids is. I am a good mom. I have never told her, but as she gets older she looks more and more like the rapist and I cry in my room nearly every day because of it. She's mine. I know this, but it's just so much to deal with. Over a decade and it may as well have happened yesterday. My husband keeps suggesting therapy, but I guess I'm afraid it will all come out and she will be crushed. My husband is an amazing father to her, so at least there's that. IDK how I would cope without him. My sperm donor is my mother's stepfather. She was 12 the first time he raped her, 14 when she got pregnant with my older, only full-blooded, sister, 15 when he got her pregnant with me. Then she ran away with us. He found her, kidnapped us and told her that if she ever wanted to see us again, she'd come home. Meanwhile her mother did nothing about the abuse, even blamed her for garnering so much of his attention. My dad married her at age 17. He saved all of our lives. He's my favorite person every day. I found out because a half-sister of mine tried to tell me and my full sister, after an argument, that my mother wanted it, asked for it. She and her full sister went back east to visit him recently with their toddler and infant children. Makes me sick. Edit. Stuff I forgot. Surprisingly, I am a product of both. I am Canadian. I am Native American. My tribe is known as Swampy Cree. My real dad is both my cousin and my dad. He raped my mom. I am a forced mistake. My dad left when I was really young. I have never confronted him ever in my life. I feel we have the best relationship though. We've been playing hide and seek for about 14 years now and I still cannot find him. All jokes aside, I never confronted him nor do I have any memories. All I know is his name. I found out because my mom was emotionally ducked up and used to tell me all the time to hurt me. I met him once when I was 7. Few years ago a sister of mine found me on Facebook and I found out I have 18 more siblings than I thought. He messages me on FB. It's weird because he seems to think I missed him or something. I had a non-rapist stepfather growing up, so I never miss Mr. Raper Man. This might get buried, but capital I. 2. I'm the product of rape. My mom regularly had seizure-like episodes where she'd start shaking violently and become unconscious after half a minute or so. One time, she had one of her episodes on a train station, late in the evening. We're not exactly sure what happened after that, but 9 months later, I was born. I grew up living at my grandparents' house, together with my mom. She's been pretty forthcoming with it and told me at a fairly young age, the hardest part of growing up without a father is not being able to relate to others. I've never had a dad cheering me on from the sidelines of the soccer field. I've never had the opportunity to share a beer with my old man, and I've never been able to happily celebrate Father's Day. Guys and gals, next time you see your dad, give him a hug from me. It's the closest I'll ever be to having a real dad. Edit. Customary thanks for the gold internet stranger. I just wish I'd never have to comment on this thread, but thanks nonetheless. I found out at a pretty young age. My mom was always open about what happened to her and how I came about. The hospital pushed for her to give me up for adoption for some reason, but she basically told them to duck off and I was her child so she would raise me. I have 2 older brothers. Their father was killed in an accident about 6 years before I was born. I have heard so many stories about him that I have always kind of thought of him as my dad, even though he isn't. I have never been treated any differently by any of my family or my mother. Maybe even a little more special because I'm the baby and I'm a girl. The only real father figure I had in my life was my grandfather, but he passed when I was about 9 years old. I could do no wrong in his eyes. I've had some pretty insensitive people that when they hear the story they ask why my mom didn't have an abortion. By the time my mom found out she was pregnant with me, it was too late for an abortion even if she wanted one. No one was ever caught for what they did to her. Being the product of abuse doesn't really bother me. I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm happy. That's all that matters to me and my family. Shared this fairly recently in the biggest family secret thread, but I'm the product of rape. From what my mom told me, they were friends and she was dating some other guy at the time. My sperm donor invited her over one night and, thinking it was just going to be them hanging out, she went over. He ended up holding her down and raping her while his mom did nothing downstairs. My mom was a virgin at the time. From what I know, both sperm donor and sperm donor's mother served time for their crimes. His for the rape, hers for endangerment of a minor. Mom wanted to move out of state to protect us, but South Carolina has bullet laws that say rapists can sue their victims in court for custody of any children born of the rape. So we had to stay until I was at least 10 to see if he would try to ask for custody. Thankfully, he didn't, and we moved to my current place of residence when I was 11. I've never met my sperm donor and I don't have any interest in doing so. He apparently wants to write me a letter explaining his actions. But I know it's going to be a feel bad for me because I was a horny teenager and your mom was right there crock of bullet. My mom kept the details of my conception a secret from me until I was raped about 2 years ago. We went through similar struggles facing victim blaming, extreme paranoia and suicidal tendencies as a result of our assaults. Except I was thankfully on the pill at the time. It just really sucks knowing I'm a second generation survivor and I wish it didn't have to be like this. I'm 19 now, but I found out that my dad was not my biological dad when I was 15. I found out when my mom thought I was mentally insane because I kept lashing out and was antisocial. So she started sending me to therapists to fix me, and my older cousin out of pity told me that my father was never my father. It explains so much. My mom and dad had always been abusive and the man I thought was my father for 15 years had been mistreating me and putting my siblings above of me. It all made sense. My mother dodges the question, but my grandma told me the truth about me being an abuse baby. It got really confusing because my mom had a BF her senior year in HS and he kept thinking I was his child. So he would take me to trips and things. But his wife became too jealous and I guess he gave up on me. I keep asking for more information but my family lash at me and cast me out. All I know is that my mother was abducted after work and she was able to get his ID. My supposed father was dating my mom at the time, became so jealous that he cut up the ID and ever since has been my dad. I couldn't believe how long I had been deceived and mistreated. Maybe it's a little too much to share, but imagine being literally locked in a cellar with a dirty beat bed and being told I wish you were never born. You are the devil. I don't want you anywhere near my family, and then being thrust into the cruel world of today to make a living. Life is rich and I'm just glad I have an amazing boyfriend that helps me. I wouldn't be in college if it weren't for him. My mom was raped and I am the result of that rape. I don't need to ask why she kept me. That was just who she was. My mom married a man when I was 11 months old, and as far back as I can remember, I was reminded of it. The older I got, the more of a daily routine it became to hear that I was the result of some disgusting excuse for a human. I was never treated the same as my siblings, and the reason for that really was that I was not his. I was the turd that lived. I remember one time, maybe at age 9, my mom was asleep and I crept into her bedroom to ask her something and touched her shoulder. She jumped, screamed, then began yelling at me that I shouldn't do that to someone who had been victimized. That was the first and only time it occurred to me that something terrible had happened to her despite being told she was raped. I was always afraid to ask more about it, like how it happened or if she knew who it was. As I grew older, I learned my mom was a bit of a rebel in the 70s and my stepdad belonged to a biker gang. They married before my first birthday but have never discussed how long they'd known each other or how they met. Everything that was not our business was not discussed with us. When I became an adult, I made the decision to respect their privacy and never asked about how I came to be. But that never stopped me wondering as the years went by. My mother passed away suddenly just shy of 7 years ago. The man who she married, the only daddy I ever had despite how I was treated, passed away in August. Though I was treated different than my siblings, there are still many good memories I hold dear to my heart. Their astounding love for my daughter made up for it all. Other than medical history, I don't see any reason to wonder anymore. They loved each other and that's all that matters to me now.